Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, where we talk to innovators who are rewriting the DNA of healthcare. Today, we welcome our guest, Marco Smit, an accomplished entrepreneur and executive at forefront of AI and healthcare. As the Vice President of Business Development at Gesund.ai, Marco has been instrumental in transforming clinical AI landscape, driving growth and aligning innovation with regulatory engagement. In this episode, we will delve into his inspiring journey, the impact of Gesund.ai, and his vision for the future of health tech. Marco, welcome to Health Tech Heroes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here, and we'll dive right into it. Your career is a remarkable blend of entrepreneurship, strategy, and innovation. Can you share your personal journey from your early beginnings in Netherlands to become a global leader in healthcare and AI?
Yes, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing here for the community. So my background is I'm Dutch and French. I raised my kids. I have two kids. I raised my kids in French only for as long as I could, even though I was living in Silicon Valley. In the Netherlands, I obtained a Master's of Science in Economics from Erasmus University in Rotterdam, and was drawn really to leadership and using leadership for good. I had it in my personal life and student life, but also a need for speed. So when you're in Europe, the most intense training for becoming a leader was management consulting. And so I did that in Europe and Asia. During college, I did some internship with Bain. Then I started working with A.T. Kearney, doing a lot of change management, restructuring organizations in Europe, and then moved to a monitor company, which was founded by Michael Porter from Harvard and other Harvard professors to really focus on what you just mentioned, growth. And joined in Asia and then ultimately transitioned to the US and really hit a pivotal moment in my journey. I was working with, and I think we're coming back to this in a bit more detail later on, but the gist of it is that I worked with Genentech on a drug that they thought was going to be a small niche drug. And by the work that we did, we amplified the patient impact X. And that became my passion. Set the right innovation free, figure out what's holding its back, scale up its patient impact. And that's what I really have focused on since then. So I see myself as a kind of a growth architect, which is exactly what we're talking about here. It's like recognize that there is a lot more potential impact for the innovation, and then figuring out what leadership role can I take on to make that breakout growth happen. I've done that now in my career raise. The company I was with, Monitor Company, had invested in a startup that had $1 million in the bank and 5 strategies, which means no strategy. I really helped them figure out where the big impact can be, and it really took off and was acquired. Then in digital health, then in real-world data and real-world evidence, worked with Farzad Mostashari when he was CTO of Health and Human Services under Obama, and now in AI, in healthcare, as you said. And I think the one part I will say is that I believe that of all the transformations I've been involved with, AI is far, far more transformative than we can even understand at this point. Where we are right now is like when we had the .com transformation, we started off with the portals, which were basically online .com versions of newspapers because we were used to newspapers being so central in our life. And I think same thing for AI. We are just using it to replicate and turbo boost what we already are used to doing. And I think that's not where the true value is. I think there's a lot more upside there, but I think that's where we are today. So don't believe that this is a hype and a bubble and it's going to all burst. I think we're barely getting started.
Thank you very much. I had the same discussion with someone. I said, I don't think we have even started scratching the surface. We are like getting close to scratching the surface, but we have not scratched the surface. We are just like, okay, there is potential. We see it. Let's go dig in a little bit. So a couple of things that I want to highlight a little bit. Your origin in Netherlands, and Netherlands may not be a country like people talk about, like your educational origin, at least in Netherlands, right? May not recognize as it is an advanced country, but they do not recognize how much impact it has. I think it is the company that helps design the chips. There's only one company, and every chip maker uses the company from Netherlands. So what is it called?
TSMC, or you're right. TSMC uses them, but I don't remember the exact name. They're in Eindhoven. They're near Philips. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so Netherlands has huge impact on everything AI, pretty much everything silicon. Saying that, the second part I was curious, and if you are able to share this, how did you make it 10x in Genentech? That's a remarkable jump, right? 2x is, hey, you know what? Yeah, that's really good. I achieved. What was the 10x? What was the factor?
Yeah, so I think that was really kind of an eye opener for myself as well. So I had done general consulting, worked in lots of different industries. We at Monitor Company, I was at Monitor Company when we started working with Genentech. This was our very first project with them. And the long story short was that they did two things. They had an inside out perspective. So they said, this is the science, this is what FDA tells us, this is what insurance can tell us. And so they just broadcasted that as much as possible, and that's how they hoped they would have maximum clinical impact. Whereas we took an outside-in perspective and say, what is actually the market constructed of? What pockets of very different demand? Let's say if you go to a community clinic or you go to Stanford, you do not sell the same, they do not have the same problems, they do not have the same patients. So you cannot take the same broadcast approach. So you need to listen in. If you listen in and say, what can I do? What can I become? Then there was a lot more possible. And so we did really kind of an outside-in perspective instead of an inside-out perspective. And the second part was that they could observe what was happening. So which physicians is a high prescriber, medium prescriber, low prescriber, but they could tell not two things. Number one is why, and number one, and number two is, and how much is the true potential. Like if I have a community clinic with very few patients who were fitting my on-label use, then I'm maybe tapping out, and maybe therefore I'm a low prescriber. Alternatively, I may have a lot more patients, but I'm not convinced by your pitch or by your scientific evidence. So they couldn't tell why some of these physicians were what they were. So we helped them, number one, outside in perspective. Number two, really understand by market segment, what is the full potential? And when you looked at that, it was a drug that at the time was doing, I think, $280 million. And we said it can go to 1.2 billion. And it did go to 1.2 billion in 2 years, but it ultimately grew into an $8 billion drug. It grew even more than 10x, I guess.
10x,
so
okay.
yeah. So and that was really an eye-opener for me, and that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing today to some extent as well.
That's fantastic. So you had to work with medical teams to reach out to doctors and MSLs. So it was not just about technology, it was also strategy, how you apply technology to eventually analyze the insights, but also have a really good strategy behind the technology to make the best of the technology that you have in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are two comments to make. One is we did very long interviews with lots and lots of physicians. I think something like 600 physicians in multiple different focus groups, each for like 2 hours or so. So really well going in depth. And then the second part two is that the Genentech team at the time was very much thinking the standard of care is chemo and we are targeted. And so we must say everything that is not targeted is bad and we should replace chemo with Rituxan. And our approach was to say, why can you not turn CHOP into R-CHOP? Because that will still make the care so much better. It will mitigate so many side effects. It will still be a very big benefit as a step to gradually getting a Rituxan adoption. And so that's why you see R-CHOP now. And it made it from going head on against what they had been growing up and they'd doing every day, to actually saying, why don't we align first, prove what's there, and then continue on from there. So it was a very big, again, mindset shift for them as well.
There is also sometimes there is a personal story behind this, like why we do it. And that really makes us wake up every day morning with the motivation. And do you have a story, personal story, something that you can share?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons. So a couple of kind of things happen around the same time. And in this case too is number one, I'd been working in Asia in some remote places, and I had several kind of near-death experiences. And then while I was working on this Rituxan turnaround strategy, someone very close to me passed away, had a stroke. And before the last minutes, moment of our lives, I could still talk to her and say, I am actually working to help cancer patients. I'm not helping, because my company was also working to help Coke sell more cans of Coke. So like, no, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to have no regrets. If it ends tomorrow, I want to have no regrets. And I want to, and if I can help more cancer patients get access to treatments that inherently are are good for them, but are not reaching them, to your point, not for technology reasons, but because we don't know how to unlock the clinical access. That is what we need to really work on. So that's what I made my mission, is to say, can I find innovation that can really be, as I said, freed and scaled up, and how do I make it happen? So that's really became my personal passion. And, my mother passed away from cancer, pancreatic cancer. So I'm very much into like early detection, because as you can imagine, pancreatic cancer, typically 85% of the cases, by the time it's detected, it's already too late to do anything about it. So yes, my focus has been that from a professional and a personal reason on this.
Gesund, and thank you very much for sharing those personal stories. And for me, healthcare has been a passion, and I've always been like, do the right thing and lead a meaningful life, and that has led me into healthcare, and I'm very focused on that. And I think that's exactly what you're doing right now at Gesund.ai as well, very actively. And Gesund.ai has positioned itself as a leading platform in clinical AI. Can you tell us about its core offerings and how it stands out rapidly in this rapidly growing field? More specifically, why do you believe it is a leading platform?
Yeah, so maybe I kind of do a mini origin story, is how I got to Gesund.ai.
Sure.
Is I was at Roche, and was recruited to a company called Genentech, which is a surgery company. And they wanted to do real world data and AI, and the head of AI was just leaving to start a company, which turns out to be Gesund.ai. When I was there, we were doing great AI work. And we would expose surgeons to it. And I was like, I love this. Can I use it in my surgery room, in my OR, with my patients? And of course, we were like, whoa, no. The model is way too brittle. It's not possible to take it from the lab to the bench. Just like that. And then the next question would obviously be like, so, but how? How quickly can you get that there? And that turned out to be a real big bottleneck, actually. That's a really, and it was not just for Genentech. We had many collaborators. We'd say someone at Moffitt Cancer Center would say, we have a fantastic AI that works in my little OR. I think all surgeons should benefit from this. How do we do this? How do we scale it up? And again, it was not that easy. So just to the example I was talking about, we have innovation that works, but it needs to be robust. It needs to be scaled responsibly, safely, and mainly fast as well. And so that was what Gesund.ai was addressing. So that's why I ultimately switched over to Gesund.ai, because they really addressed the industry bottleneck. And they were the first to take what I would call a platform approach to building AI and testing and evaluating AI. At the super granular level, at the regulatory grade level. There's a lot of AI that gets built that's on R&D level or academic publication level, but there's a very small trickle of that R&D that actually makes it into the clinic, and even smaller trickle that then actually gets adoption and heavily used. So what attracted me to Gesund.ai was they were the first to recognize this bottleneck. They were the first to build an AI lifecycle approach and build this FDA-grade track and trace of data, models, validation runs, annotators, any detail that you want to have. So when PCCPs were introduced, when now Macquarie is talking about toxicology innovation, we don't want to use animals, we want to use AI simulations and digital twins. Gesund.ai already was envisioning a world like that. And so they built a platform that was already built for that future when regulatory authorities and others arrived at that future. So that's one part what made Gesund.ai important for me to join, and why it was kind of visionary. In its growth, it has been laser focused on AI clinical trials. Gradually, as we have more companies move from the bench to clearing FDA and then want to go into the market, then the offering is being extended into monitoring and also to updating models. A lot of AI models are built with relatively small training populations, sets, so you are bound to run into edge cases that you did not test for. If you flag that in your PCCP that I do know that there's going to be certain use cases that I couldn't test for, but I will be on the lookout for that, I will detect the risk and have a risk mitigation plan, then that's fine. You can just get FDA clearance for that little modification that you need to do instead of having to go back to square one and re-evaluating everything. So that's what Gesund.ai is built for. And yes, I think you mentioned it's a rapidly growing field. It is a bit of so in predictive AI, there is, I think the next step is to make this evidence generation for payers, just as strong if we do evidence generation for the FDA, because ultimately these go to the FDA approval to ultimately get also payer approval and build a business. And then I think the other part too is there are many what I call LDLTs, not LDTs, but LDLTs. So locally developed, locally tested algorithms. And there are now new anti-discrimination laws that go into effect where you need to prove that you tested it, your own algorithm, even if it was not built by a third party, but it was built by you, that is not discriminatory. And if it is discriminatory, how are you going to fix it? Platforms like Gesund.ai are perfect for that. So yes, and I think we see a lot of other companies coming in for Gen AI testing, Genentech AI. That's really exciting too, but I think it's still much more early stage. So where predictive AI is maybe in the 6th inning, Gen AI and Genentech AI are, well, Gen AI is in the 1st inning and Genentech AI is warming up the plate at this point, to make that analogy stick.
Perfect. Your major client is going to be a clinician, right? So ultimately, it is a knowledge for the clinician to take action. That's where at core.
Yes. So but to clarify, are the people who pay our bills are the people who are building the AI for the clinician, right? So they're building the AI ultimately for the clinician to use it. So what we do is we create the data and the transparency that so that later on, if let's say the clinician wants to say, my patient population is more Hispanic or more African American or more whatever, did you guys do any analysis of patients like this, right? And so then with our technology, you can very quickly see we did look for those sub cohorts and they perform just like the average, or there is an issue and maybe we need to do a localization trial. But that can be done very quickly now because there's transparency instead of that making that a very complicated one-off manual process, right? So that's really critical for companies to be able to scale and for clinicians to have trust.
And it might be proprietary. What is your key source of data? Not necessarily which companies you work with or which sites you work with, but just the nature at a high level data.
So I would say there are two situations that we have. There's one situation where we do source the data. So then we have a network of partners for data. And the data can be very specific because this is more imaging data because FDA approvals tend to be heavily imaging heavy or oriented. And sometimes though it is that the customer brings their own data. For example, we did a whole body MRI, AI clearance. And obviously, there are not that many whole body MRI companies out there. On top of that, they negotiated with the FDA which data set would be used. So we just had no choice but to use their data set. So the power of what Gesund does is really in a technology platform and its partner networks that include data networks.
Okay, terrific. And Gesund is such an elegant name. It's so simple and it is very apt. Can you let us know what it means to Gesund and the name
Sure,
itself?
yes. Yeah, so Gesund means healthy in German. So it really is kind of a health assessment platform for your AI. What are the vulnerabilities and how to fix them? I think the founder had thought about calling it Sound AI, like, how sound is your AI? But I think as he started rolling out that name, the associations were not necessarily health related. So I think he figured out Gesund is easier to remember and less likely to mislead the audience into the wrong direction.
I was about to say sounds good, but I was not trying to be corny.
Yes,
that's right. Okay.
That's funny.
You have achieved impressive growth at Gesund AI, including 412% increase in the first year. Could you share specific success stories? That's again another remarkable growth. How did you achieve that? What was the key to it?
Yeah, I think maybe we can kind of walk through one example and kind of touch on a few of the elements that make that difference. So let's stick with the whole body MRI company. So first of all, we were selected to the Cancer X Accelerator, which is the first cohort. And that's actually put it on the radar screen of this whole body MRI company. They brought on board someone who's very experienced, very good in regulatory. They'd never done a regulatory approval. And so she saw this as a way to say, wow, this is the platform of the future. And that's what I don't want to use. I don't want to use a network of point solutions. I want to have one platform for it all. I then went to Canada for a conference and I arranged a meeting with one of the execs. This was supposed to be a half-hour meeting, meet and greet. And my approach is very much talking about success, not to go in with a hard sell, look how amazing our technology is and what you can do with it, but it's try to discover what you really need and how can we string together a series of wins for you, right? So that's ultimately the technology serves your needs and your wins. And so I had a very frank and insightful discussion with someone on the RAQA team for 2.5 hours, basically. And that set into motion a discussion around which opportunities to help them with. They had many, many AI models to take to FDA. And we prioritized a new FDA, AI FDA submission, the first one for them. And it was a challenge because they would have only 60 days to generate all the results, which is, to be honest, normally taking them, I think, more than a year to get there. So to have then 60 days for the next clinical trial was a little insane. It was a high pain point for them. It was the first submission for them. Cannot get it wrong. We need to do a do-over. We need to get this right. It played to our strengths of the platform and the partnership, so we could work faster than you could do in any traditional way, and that was great. But then I found that many of the teams were on different pages: the clinical team, the legal team, all these different teams, different urgency, different understanding, and so I negotiated a contract that was, I heard someone from Anthropic last week at Stanford say this one sentence that I love, which is, think big, start small, but move fast. So that's the kind of contract that I put together. I think we kind of have a trouble with that last part in healthcare a lot. And even when we get going, then what I realized very quickly is we are saying sometimes the same thing, but all these different teams, we have a data teams, data science team, we have R&D team, we have so many teams around the table, and not everyone means the same thing when they say the same thing. So I set up weekly alignment reports, weekly alignment calls, where we basically hashed these things out and got people on the same page. And that meant two things. Number one, we delivered on time, much faster than they ever could have done with any other way. And number two, we went over and beyond what they asked for. So they got everything that they were looking for the submission, and it was successful. And second of all, for us, the result meant it triggered discussions around what can we do around monitoring to help you scale faster now that you have your clearance? What can we do to help you more upstream? What can we help you do to get more of these FDA submissions done instead of taking the one year to get to the point where you now do it in 60 days. So that's what I try to do. I try to, instead of me selling a technology or a service, I try to say, let's sit around the same time on the side of the table. How can we jointly problem solve around this? And that is really critical to ultimately being a partner instead of being a vendor. And that really helped us in our success.
Terrific. I think this was just kind of an average performance for you. It was just 6x increase in performance, right? You had an 8x or more, and you had a 4x, the 412%. This was just 6x. Come on.
There you go.
No, you're setting the standards way too high here. Essentially, I arrived at the 6x because of 2
1
months,
year and
12
2 months. Yes.
Yeah. Anyhow, so I think this is a great example of understanding the pain point and addressing that pain point. And most AI companies, I think, legitimately so, are not touching on the clinical practice itself. They are doing all the meta work, which is also very important, so that we can deliver these clinical products more efficiently. But you have jumped right into deep end with the Gesund, addressing the regulatory impact and clinical impact. And the fast part, I think it's important in healthcare, that we should be cautious a little bit, but we need to move.
Yes.
We need to move, not blazing fast, but we need to move faster than what we are doing now.
Yes, I can tell you last week there was I think there were 5 AI conferences at Stanford in 1 week. It was their AI week, which is, I think, insane for them to do. So many conferences in 1 week. But my overriding observation was that many, particularly healthcare providers, so as you say, clinicians or administrative folks, they really did have this mindset that we can either be safe or we can be fast, but we cannot be both. And I think what you can tell is we do need to be both. We need to find a way to speed up being safe. So yes, we cannot speed up and by taking more risk. That's not acceptable. but we can also not go at a glacial pace by being overly focused on safety only. So that's really a challenge.
Keep those as independent concepts and be 100% safe, but we can also be fast. So it's not that when you're getting fast, that doesn't mean that you're compromising on safety. Make sure that you're doing
exactly.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are
Correct.
independent.
Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
And the challenges, I'm sure Gesund does face challenges, especially on the technical side of the regulatory, like other than the regulatory challenges, right? So growth and basically you might have to end up convincing a lot of healthcare clinics. What kind of challenges do you have in general? What challenges come to your mind?
I would say there are really three challenges that I would say. The first one is there's a lot of, maybe you can call it confusion and attention deficit. And what I mean with that is there's just a lot going on in AI. I think I saw Justin Norden, I think. He's a Stanford professor and also a founder of Qualified Health. And he was basically saying, like, it's my job to keep track of what's happening in AI in healthcare, and I have a hard time staying on top of it. So it leads to a lot of, should I be looking at this? Should I be looking at that? Should I be looking at the next thing? And so it's very hard because some of the things that you're trying to do require the customers to really stick with it and go through all the details and fully understand the implications of what they're asking and what they're trying to do. So I think there's a lot of confusion and a bit of attention deficit. So that's one of the challenges I think that Gesund, like every other company in our space, needs to deal with, is the customers are learning about it as the space evolves, and the space evolves really, really fast. So that's difficult, number one. Number two, awareness. I think there's still a lot of education. For example, Gesund delivers, while the core value proposition is technology-based or technology-enabled, we deliver clinical trials through services. So then can easily be confused for it being just a services business and just getting some people to read images, etc. And so there is some awareness that needs to be built around what does it mean in terms of what the different options are and what different routes are that you can go to market, or you can get a solution for your evidence generation, for example. So awareness building is definitely and sophistication development is definitely important. And then I think a third challenge is kind of customer discovery with pharma companies. So there are a lot of pharma companies that want to use AI. Either, let's say, we work with someone in toxicology, but also some want to do it in clinical trials. And so a lot of the pharma companies are, first of all, they're very hesitant to share information about their plans or about things that they are worried about, maybe confidential or so. They're very, very hesitant. And particularly when you're not a big company, right? I worked at Roche, and I remember that at some point, mentioned this, who it was, but a C-level executive had a very clear mindset that if you have fewer than 1,000 people in a unit, you're not to be taken serious. So we were just starting. Okay. So we went from 300 to 500 in 2 years, but we're still far short of the 1,000, right? So and many pharma companies have that, and vice versa. When we were trying to acquire a company, and I still recall this is allegedly a startup at 500 people, and people at Roche were like, "Why are we dealing with a tiny company of 500 people?" For a startup, 500 people is not tiny. That's actually quite a lot. So I think pharma has. Likes to dance with partners of its equal size, but those companies are not always the most innovative partners, right? I mean, if you have large companies, they are a bit more risk averse. So yeah, I think those are the issues that you want them to open up. The more specific they can be, the more specific you can be in how you help them. But they want to be not specific because they don't want to disclose anything they should not be disclosing until they're like 1,000% sure this is going to work. So that makes life a little bit difficult on the customer discovery side with pharma.
Yeah, I've been on the pharma side and totally see that. We very often end up going with partners who are like pretty big, and just by the nature of it. And again, sometimes it works out. They're big for a reason. Pretty good. They do a good job. But if you want to go for really innovative, you have to go for smaller companies. And by nature of it, what you're telling them is we're going to make your processes really efficient. So if you are 500 people, then you are doing 5,000 people's work. You are a big company, right. Especially when it comes to technology. It should perhaps not be the same scale as a pharmaceutical company, for example, because
Yes.
the technology company whole idea is like, hey, I'm going to make things efficient. That means that I'm really efficient, like I'm 10 times more efficient. So, all right, you are a thought leader in this, obviously. And what do you think the health tech is going to look like in about 5 years? 10 years is way too far. About 5 years, even that seems far.
Yeah.
What is it going to look like in 5 years? And the second connected question is, what do you think is an opportunity for new leaders and entrepreneurs who are getting into this field?
Okay. So, yeah, not a difficult question at all. Next 5 years, people don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 months. So, so I think maybe from my perspective, I will say that I'm hoping that in the next 5 years we see an era of new blueprints. And so for example, AWS was a new blueprint for tapping into the full potential of compute and storage. And so we need new blueprints to tap into the full potential of AI in healthcare and life sciences. We not need to just apply the same blueprints that we already have. But I think you touched upon it already, some of the key questions. So I'm going to have, let's say, 2-3 topics here. So one is regulatory uncertainty and reimbursement. This regulatory uncertainty is very, very challenging. I really hope that we get resolution of that in the next 12 months. I was almost going to say it doesn't matter how, but as long as we have clarity, because buyers need honest standards that they can trust. We heard some stories that there's a potential for the FDA kind of limiting its involvement with AI in healthcare, pulling back on that and pushing it more down to the buyers of AI. But you cannot push it down to them, because there's going to be so many health systems who all need to basically reinvent the wheel of evaluating all these models. And so it's not their core business. So it's better to have one independent organization to do that. There's a possibility of third-party verification industry emerging. CHAI, Coalition for Healthcare AI, I've been very much involved with them. Gesund has been very much involved with them. They're trying to be that, but there are many organizations who try to be third-party verification. So regulatory uncertainty and reimbursement in the next 5 years, hopefully it doesn't last, particularly on the regulatory side, past the next year, and then we can start working with whatever the reality is after that. So, second to that is we need to see real success stories. Right now we have stories of companies that can build, that are in the market, but are they financially exciting? Are they clinically exciting? We don't have many unicorns in this area. We've seen in digital health now, Omada Health and Hinge Health, but you've seen how long that has taken them, 10 plus years to get there, right? We want to see some success stories, not just of funding and building, but also making financial and clinical change or impact on the clinic. That would be fantastic. I think providers, they are really, really struggling because they have. When I was at Stanford last week, the Coalition for Healthcare AI, so many providers, sophisticated, all over the spectrum. We're talking about AI governance, risk, and they have a hard time already dealing with today's challenges, let alone capitalizing on tomorrow's opportunities with AI. So I think that is really challenging. There is a question. We mentioned whole body MRIs earlier, and this goes, when I worked in Asia, when mobile adoption, for example, was something that in the US, there was a lot of back legacy from landlines, and then the question was, how do you get mobile in there, and does it cannibalize this? And China could leapfrog because they lacked that legacy infrastructure, so they could go straight to mobile much more aggressively because there was nothing to replace, for example. I think here the question too is the existing providers have this legacy workforce, infrastructure, etc. How are they going to adapt to that new world? But when you look at a company like Prenuvo, who I think has publicly stated they made more than $100 million last year, they're profitable, they're growing very fast. So the self-pay market, you've seen Ezra now being acquired by Function. So the self-pay market is a question, can we build new business models that can be at scale and clinically relevant? And can that become a way to get AI adopted in healthcare quicker? And then I think for pharma, what I'm really hoping for in the next 5 years in particular, that we get more use of AI in clinical trials in particular. So I think we already have done a lot of use of it in discovery and commercialization. Those are what I call low-hanging fruits. But clinical trial is where there's an 85% failure rate, where people are much more risk averse. And on the flip side, if we can even make a 5 or 10% improvement, it'd be a fantastic win. So it really changed how we can bring drugs to markets. And I think there are so many opportunities for AI to help, from evidence generation, patient recruitment. It's just enormous opportunity. So I really hope that comes through in the next 5 years.
And thank you very much for sharing these insights. It's pretty much a masterclass how where AI and healthcare are going to go next. And one thing that you did talk about the regulatory, right, for the technology in the previous technology, we might tend to say that we have spent so much time writing down these regulations. It's a sunk cost philosophy, I think. As you said, in Asia, you just like let all the telephone, all the regulations go and created a whole new mobile thing. I think that's a key point I wanted to bring out. That, look here, you know what? Yes, you created a 6,000 page document, but that's not relevant to the new age. Let it go. Let's get rid of that fallacy of sunk cost. Just create new one, more efficient, and focus on what is at hand now. And second thing that struck me was it needs to be regulated at higher level by the FDA. Otherwise, I think what happens theoretically, it looks like, hey, let clinicians have that independence, but there is too many layers in the United States where for-profit agencies will jump in and do what makes them more profitable rather than what's good for the patient eventually. I think if it is regulated by the FDA with the patient in mind, I think that framework might be a little bit more robust and sustainable in the long term than having everybody make their own decisions. And I think we see that disparity in data quality across the board just because of that lack of regulation. And there were several other points that you brought out. I have to go look at and listen to it carefully.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that if you think about some of the regulations and if you see how even in the last maybe like 2 years, a lot of the attempts have been to say we have the 510K regulation is from, literally decades ago, right? And they're literally trying to figure out how do we stretch it? Like the PCCP was one regulation that came out to say, like, how do we stretch it to what we actually want to do? But we still need to go back to the original anchor, the original basis for our mandate, which is the medical devices. And so I think you're right, having a rethink in terms of first principles, right? What should we really build is a good question to ask. And I think the second part too is ultimately what you see is the most resource-rich providers, they are able to do all this evaluation and invest in assessing AI models for their populations. But if you're a mid-sized or small-sized hospital, you don't have the ability to do that. So it becomes very much a world of haves and have-nots. Those who can do the evaluations, those who just have to rely on someone else's because they don't have the resources or the bandwidth to do it or the expertise. And I think for the AI builders as well, if you have one test to pass, and with that I can go to market, versus if I have like umpteen tests to pass, then it just becomes very difficult. When I was at Health Expense, because we were dealing with patients' money, every single client originally was asking for a full safety assessment, and so we ultimately had to go to the best third-party reviewer and say, you do the most ultimate tests, and we do it one time, and then whenever that question comes up, we can send the report, and that stops it. Okay. So, but you can't grow every time that you have a test and you go to a new hospital. They say, I want to run my own evaluations because I don't trust the other evaluations, right? Yep. There needs to be one benchmark, one bar to hit, and then you need to be able to go from there.
Similar question, but it's actually may sound similar, but very different question. Advice to the entrepreneurs and leaders who are coming into this field, but from a perspective of a leader, right? What mindset do you need to have to be a good leader? May not even touch on health tech, healthcare, but what is your advice to people who are becoming leaders and entrepreneurs of next generation?
Yeah. So I think first maybe a few. So I think there may be 4 or 5 comments to make. Number one, seek mentors. Really, building a startup, whether it's in healthcare or outside of healthcare, is so hard. And just because you're good at getting things from point A to point B doesn't mean that you're good at getting it from B to point C. So seek mentors who have already gone towards these phases that you need to explore yourself and seek their input. Help you peek around the corner, right? So that you don't make avoidable mistakes. Number one. Number two is please please do not get obsessed with accelerator selection, except for StartX, because StartX is a great accelerator. But if I see so many startups who are not getting customers to really buy in, they're not getting investors to really buy in, but they can get to the next accelerator. And so they keep going from one accelerator to the next. That is not getting you to product market fit. It's not what you need. Do what is needed, not just what feels good. And it feels good to be selected by an accelerator, but it's just postponing you hitting the pavement and really figuring out what the problem is that you need to solve. And on that note, I think what you need to do as well as a entrepreneur, just for healthcare, and I'm sure this is outside of healthcare probably the same, is solve your clients' problems for them, right? So whether it's regulatory reimbursement, whether it's the workflow integration, you need to think about ultimately my technology is a means to an end, or my product is a means to an end. They're not buying my technology just for my technology. They buy my technology because they have a larger problem, and help them solve that larger problem. And maybe a corollary to that is this is where you need to learn how to balance letting customers tell you what they need and not listen to them too much, because sometimes you know better what your technology can really do than they do. So they'll ask you the wrong thing because they want you to succeed, and they don't ask you what's really possible because they don't know what's really possible. And so you need to learn so that you understand and listen, to know what their problems are. But then you need to be able to say, I know you think that this is what the problem I can solve, but this is a local optimum. I can actually solve your your higher order optimum as well. And so that is when you delight customers. That's when it will pull you through and work and partner up with you to succeed. And final comment, try as much as you can. I see so many entrepreneurs who say, well, as long as today is better than yesterday, we're making progress, right? It's like, okay, this is not how you're going to win. You need to plan from the future back to today. Where is the market going to be? Where are the needs going to be 1, 2, 3 years from now? And if I'm having a 6 to 12 month sales cycle, that's when I need to have impact. So how do I work back from the 12 months to today, or from the 2 years to today? And you cannot just stack good days and hope that in the end things will work out fine. You need to really think back from the future today, live in the future, and work to where you are today.
Thank you very much for clarity on these points. I think I got really good clarity on all the points except for one, because I have not heard it come out this strong anywhere else, is obsession with accelerator. So what is the downside of that?
I think it's just I don't want to pick out a particular company, but I do see companies, let's say even if I'm on the receiving end, if I'm a customer and I see that you went to 1 or 2 accelerators, okay, so be it. But for example, I was mentoring a company and they literally have been to like 9 or 10 accelerators for programs. I'm like, okay, are you living for the customers here? Are you living for investors, or are you living for accelerator participation? And I still see many postings from startup like, oh, the accelerator day was so great and this and that. It's okay, but it's a derivative. It's a proxy for your success. It's not your success, right? Your success should come from understand my customers. It resonates what I'm telling them, and I'm really creating value. And so, of course, the accelerator can help you stay alive and attract a capital that you may need to grow. But I'm just saying, it's like what Walsh said, right? The coach from if you take care of the process, then the wins will come automatically. If you just focus on the wins and you screw up the process, things go wrong, right? By the same token, if you focus on these accelerators, which really are the sideshow, they're really enabler only, you lose track of what your real goal should be. So that's what I think is important.
If you don't mind, can I dig one layer deeper into this? One more layer. So from a perspective of opportunity cost, so going into the accelerator for this particular company, just hypothetical company, right? What was the opportunity cost that they lost because they thought accelerator is good, bringing in revenue and getting bigger and bigger, and bringing in revenue itself kind of solves a lot of problems. But what was the opportunity cost lost there?
Yeah, I think there are 2 parts. One is not all accelerator. If an accelerator really does, like why I said StartX is good, because it does help you bring in customers, it does help you bring in mentors, and it exposes you to investors, so that's good. But there are not all accelerators are the same, right? So I'm not saying that accelerators are bad, but the accelerators, to your point, they need to serve on a path to the future. Now, I think, to be honest, what happened in this one particular startup is they kind of had almost the inverse of an opportunity cost. So what that means is their regulatory strategy, which they're relying on for a regulatory expert, changed, and their go-to-market was delayed by a full year. And so as a result of it, and they're not making any money in the meantime. So as a result of it, they went to the accelerators as a way to stay alive during that extra year. But I'm just saying that's not something you should be doing. It just raises a lot of eyebrows when you're on the receiving end. If I was at Roche and someone came to me and is like, wow, this guy's going after accelerator after accelerator. So he's just a lifestyle entrepreneur, or is he actually trying to build a great company here, right? So be smart about which accelerators you use, be able to explain why you use them, and be able to really gain something from them. Don't just go because you can get accepted, right? So that's what I'm saying.
All right, that's perfect. And there is a uneven growth path, not focused growth path. That's an opportunity cost. And second, optics is definitely a thing that have gone through so many accelerators, and maybe you're not serious about your core business. And as a final question, you can take, I typically give 90 seconds, but you can take more. If there is any question that I missed, or if you think there is something critical that you want to reiterate, the question is yours, answer is yours, and the stage is yours, Marco.
I think maybe a few quick comments. Number one, to maybe also to stick with the health tech leaders. There were two more points that I realized that I needed to add. One is have an evidence strategy. If you want to convince pharma or clinicians or anyone, show them that you really thought about evidence. I think there's just a lack of evidence thinking in these startups these days. Number one. Number two, evolve. Don't be dogmatic. What is hot and new today is not new tomorrow, and the needs of your customers change as well. So don't be dogmatic, continue to evolve. Number three, more specific to healthcare and life science and AI. AI is in the very early innings. We're in inning 1 or 2. Maybe predictive is in inning 3, Gen AI is in inning 2, and agentic AI is barely in inning 1. Think about what makes your contribution really unique for the next 1 to 2 years. What are you adding to the market that would not be there if you were not there? And what changes are going to be transformational that you can help have more impact. These are some of the things that I think would be very important. Maybe a final comment for pharma companies, and I think this is not just for pharma companies, but specifically for pharma companies. When it comes to the buy-build decision, we try to be objective and try to be a little bit more adventurous with innovators. And I think there's always a tendency to build inside, no matter whether it's pharma or other healthcare organizations. But there's so much that needs to be built and invented. Don't waste your time on things that already exist. So if things already exist, or an external partner is like 80% of the way there and they can just close it quickly, let them do it, and you focus on what's really unique and really is a difference maker at the end of the day. Don't waste your time replicating skills.
And thank you very much, Marco. And for the pharma companies, I think it's also important to notice that there are only 500 people in a company that is planning on making you really efficient. That is probably equivalent to 5,000 people in the company, so they're not too small. And with that, I really appreciate your time, Marco.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.